Hello, everybody. Welcome to Resilience plus Rise, the podcast where we transform adversities into triumph, illuminate the extraordinary potential within all of us. I'm your host, Thomas Scaria, resilience coach, a ultra marathoner, and a firm believer in your next most powerful chapter. This podcast is a companion to my upcoming book, Resilience plus Rise 26.2 Transformative Miles to Unleash Your Marathon of Life Mindset, coming early 2025. Here, we amplify stories of hope, perseverance, and success to inspire your journey. Today, let me take you to a word, samurai. What comes in mind? The people with the swords and ready to do anything. I'm so honored today to introduce a samurai, which he believes is that the samurai success can unlock your destiny. I'm proud to introduce to you David C. Olcott. David believes we are ready to take our charge of your destiny and live the life you were meant to live. Speaking with David, he is a seasoned executive coach, more than 30 plus years of experience. He's an NLP Master, a martial artist. Yes, that's where samurai comes in, and a best selling author. So, without wasting much time, let's directly jump into David. Welcome to Resilience plus Rise.
Thomas, well, thank you for that amazing introduction, man. I'm excited about meeting this guy.
As they say in Laurels, you are so worth it, sir. You are so worth it. So, tell me, you never woke up one fine day and said that let me show how to be a samurai in the world of success. Tell me the journey. I know there would be a lot, but in snippets, where you were and what got you to this role that you are on.
So years ago, I grew up in the Florida Keys, those little dots on the end of Florida, if you will. And I've lived most of my life underneath the water, if you can believe that, because I've scuba dived most of my life.
Okay.
And till about the age of 29, I think I actually did some math, and I was like, I actually lived more of my life on the water, in the water, underneath the water than I had on top of the water.
Okay.
So just so much excitement, of growing up down there. And I got a chance to meet so many people on vacation, talking with them, and they were all very wealthy. They had all this money, and they were coming down to my hometown, and they were enjoying themselves. And I just had a real opportunity to start interviewing them. I wouldn't call it that, I was just, hey, how'd you do this? What was this? And I just got very curious about how they were being successful. And so one of the things that as I moved into graduating from the university with a finance degree and getting involved in law and banking and then politics, if you can believe that, and spent a number of years there and then involved in real estate. And, the company I was working for was the business manager for the number one selling real estate agent in the world. And our office was a yacht on South Beach. And we would take our clients on the yacht and we'd go around and take a look through all the intercoastal, taking a look at all these beautiful homes and the magnificence of the place and the stars that were meeting, Sylvester Stallone, Madonna. And Thomas, I was absolutely depressed out of my mind.
Oh, okay.
I had what
I thought, okay, there's a fairy tale going on, and suddenly, what just happened? But sure, please continue.
and that's where this resilience for me came up, because I had a pretty tough life growing up with my dad. He and I very physical with each other kind of stuff, and many times in the hospital with issues between he and I. And I really had to come through some things. And I, again, was so depressed when I was living the life that everybody said was so powerful. I had all this access to money, the women, the cars, all these things. And I just was so unhappy. And I really had to figure out how I was going to do something different. And so in that midst of all that, I got on a different spiritual path. I started learning about sales and spirituality and things like this. And there was a book that I read, a book that was called Samurai Selling. And in that book, it showed me this idea of being samurai. Samurai, loosely translated, means in service of others. And when I was growing up in my church, I had a pastor there who, Pastor Smith, who said, one of the greatest lives you can live is truly being in service of another. And so there was my moment, right, of here was this man I really respected as a preacher. And then all of a sudden this book saying the same thing is like, oh my gosh, this is the way. This is my path about finding out how I can truly be in service of others. And so for the next 30 years, I've discovered that in truly being in service of others, truly becoming samurai, I had to learn how to get myself out of the hell out of the way, if you will, so that I could really be there for other people. So I had to go to work on me. And that's the real difference that I found on this journey, that so much of my upbringing in my past was, no, you can't focus on you. You can't love you. You can't do this. That's selfish. From a perspective, I understand where they were coming from. But the perspective is, if I'm going to work on me so I can truly be in service to you, that's not being selfish. That's truly being in service. If I work on me all the time so I can figure out how to get you to help me get better, that's being selfish. But this concept of being samurai is the life that I wish to live, so that I'm living that today.
Fantastic. So that was one pivot point wherein you felt you were not fulfilled. You felt depressed. You felt something was lacking, and as they say, the stars aligned. Whether it was Pastor Smith coming to your life, or it was the book that you read, and a sense of realization that there's something more about David than just fast boats, beautiful rides, money, etc. But usually life doesn't stop with that pause and say that, okay, you have realized, and now here's the road to success.
I would agree with you, sir. I wish you could have told me that 35 years ago.
So what happened during those times?
Oh, goodness. Well, that's when the real journey began. And I went to work in real estate. And of course, I got to work with Tony Robbins for a number of years, and in the seminar business. And, there was so much promise in that. As a matter of fact, I was working in the seminar business, and I was following up with people from a totally ego perspective, Thomas. This wasn't my soul talking at all. I was thinking about, how can I figure out how I can get more sales later on? And so I was like, well, I'm going to be back there 2 years. So I started having relationships with people like, hey, how's it going? How'd you like the seminar? And as the universe is, so beautifully, you expect one thing and all of a sudden it shows up in a different way so beautifully. And what I found was that people had gone to the seminars, they had this amazing breakthroughs. They had gotten divorced, they'd gotten married, they'd started the relationship back with their kids, they had left hanging out. I mean, major life transforming decisions at these seminars. And yet, a couple of weeks later, when I was picking up the phone to talk to them, they were falling flat on their face. They weren't able to sustain the decisions they had made at those programs. I was like, there's something missing. So in the midst of all this, I started talking to them and going, well, what's going on? What's happening? And we started applying the information they had learned at the seminar to their lives now. After that, they had been out of the programs, they've been out of it for a couple months, and we started getting results again. And I was so excited, Thomas, about, oh my gosh. And remember, this is 28, almost 30 years ago. There was no term called coaching at that time. As a matter of fact, when I started announcing myself or introducing myself as a coach, people were like, is that baseball? Is that football? And today, of course, we know that, right? As a business coach or personal coach. So I really was like, there's got to be something else. So that was the birth of Samurai Success. Took both of those ideas. And so Samurai means loosely in service of others, success. And so that's what I really wanted to be able to create the principles of this business to truly be in service of others.
I go back to another point that you mentioned, is that to be of service. So first and foremost, as you mentioned, is that you got to know your own self. As I totally believe, especially from the biblical principles, love your neighbor. But people conveniently forget the next statement, as yourself.
Beautiful.
So how can you love someone else or be of service till you're not a service to your own self? How can you fill a cup of others till you do not have a cup within your own self that is filled up?
It's actually a phrase that we use here a lot at Samurai Success. You cannot give something away you do not possess.
Not
So If you aren't working, by the way, that's all of our coaches have to commit themselves to living this technology, not building it, not creating it, not any of that. They've got to live it. And that's a tough road for people because people want the easy road. This is not an easy path. To truly be in service to another, you have to work on you. You have to get past the number one thing that the masters have said: do not judge. And I will tell you, Thomas, that there's one thing I found out about myself and all of our clients. You know who we judge the most? Right here.
Yes.
And until we stop doing that, guess what? That's what I possess. I possess judgment. And therefore, when I meet you, you beautiful, magnificent soul that you are, all I can do is give you what I have. So how do I stop doing that? Because I cannot be in service of another if I'm busy judging me, because I'm not even in service of myself.
So true. So that would have been easy, right?
Oh, then it got easy. Yeah. You know the path, baby.
Because again, as we have, that's how we have been inculcated in this world about, okay, forget about yourself, judge others. Your benchmark is how they reach their goals.
Mm.
And when you start putting yourself in that particular picture, that's when you have a battle of loss, a battle of loss of self identity. You may get money, you may get the fame, may get the fortune, but where are you? So, in this journey, David, you would have come across various learnings that have translated into the book of Summarize Success. And guys, I will be putting out David's links in the comments below over here. Please do reach out. He is a absolute a treasure trove of information. Whether you're just going through the keynotes of his book or just looking through some of the posts and the articles, it is just amazing. For me, the last couple of days have been huge learning. So make use of it. It is there for you to pick it up and run with it. So, what were the learnings that when you look back at this point of time in your life, you say that that's what has helped me to be a better human?
Mm, beautifully said. And I love that word, human, because I'm here to be human, right? And I will tell you that probably the greatest gift. So let's just go right to that. The thing that has struck me the most about this magnificent place is that I was under the belief from watching movies, television, well-meaning friends, family, parents, that I was here to discover who I am. And
Hmm.
you hear this from people all the time. It's not you, it's me. I've got to go find myself. I've got to go discover myself. And I bought into that totally. So I was on a quest. That's what I was doing. I was out there finding. And then I ran into a true master. And what he taught me was this: you're not here to discover who you are. You are here to create who you are. And Thomas, that one single concept has put me on this path of all that knowledge that you talked about is not just coming from me, it's coming through me. And that is the power of self-creation. And when you take a look at successful people on this planet, because that's all we all say, that we want to be successful, they have this one singular trait: they understand what I just said to you. And not only do they understand it, they're applying it. If you mention any celebrity, any professional athlete, any person, movie star, anybody that you admire, respect, or dislike, they have this singular trait of understanding they are creating who they are while they're in this physical plane. And that is a true power.
Let me take a pause over here. That was quite profound. So, when you say about creating, and especially when we talk about being of service to others, I believe there is another ingredient when you're creating yourself. when you mentioned about being judgmental of your own self, or comparing yourself to somebody else, or criticizing, what however we look at it as the three C's, which I say: complaining, comparing, criticizing.
Mm,
What role does love play in this?
everything.
Okay.
So in the business world, right, I don't go around to my clients, very high end type A personalities, and going, you got to be in love with yourself, and you got to, because they freak out. So Thomas,
Exactly. That's what was.
right,
That's how my question was. Like when you're talking about samurai through the business and successes,
right,
people they shirk from the word love.
yes. So
Uh-huh.
we replace that with the word abundance. And I will tell you, abundance is just another term, but it is also a frequency. And that frequency, when you're in a place of judgment versus, let's say, scarcity versus abundance, if I'm going to go solve a problem, and by the way, in business or in life as human beings, we're here to solve problems. We're constantly been bombarded by, hey, here's a situation, here's a situation. And the way we solve those things is a demonstration of our own self creation. If I say to you, I'm a glass half empty person, or if I say to you, I'm a glass half full person, I'm going to take that same problem and I'm going to solve it from very different perspectives, perceptions, and different frequencies. And I found that the reason why I wanted to give up judgment is because I couldn't solve things when I was in a place of judgment. It was like I kept getting looped and stuck, and I was like, what am I doing? But yet it's celebrated so much in this physical plane of judging each other and getting each other and burning each other and all this stuff. And I was like, man, that's just not working for me because I'm here to help people solve problems. And if I'm going to do that, I've got to be in a resourceful state. Judgment had to go away from me. So as a coach, I was forced, if you will, because I announced myself as a coach, I could not do judgment. Because I'll tell you this, you have a person come into your coaching session and you start judging them, the conversation is over.
That's so true.
So
That's so true.
you got to go in there without judgment. Well, how do I go in there without judgment, David? Then I've got to work on me and the judgments I have about me and the events. And here's the next stage of this. So discovering this huge, profound concept of I'm not here to discover who I am. I'm here to create who I am. That's first and foremost. But the superpower that every single human being listening to this podcast or on this planet, we have a singular superpower. That's our ability to create meaning of things. So that meaning comes from my identity, my self-created or created by other people's identity. Because if I'm a half full person or a half empty person, I see nothing but the perspectives from those two identities. And I solve things. I live my life. My whole reality is based upon that identity. So now, Thomas, I'm at the end of the conveyor belt that says, if I'm going to respond or react to any event in my life, it means I've already created a meaning behind that event.
Hmm.
What if I could change the meaning of that event before it showed up?
Wonderful.
That's the Swords of Illumination. In that book, we start talking about this programming, the subconscious programming that's in every single one of our brains. And you have preconditioned program. When this event happens, this is what it means. And while I don't like the way I'm behaving, I don't like the way I'm reacting to that, you can change it.
Wow. Of course, this is about swords of illumination, wherein you close the gap between who you say you are and how you show up in the world. That's what you just mentioned.
Yes.
And when you talk about your identity on how you create yourself, it goes back to the congruence of your words, your thoughts, and deeds. And that's how you have always mentioned in your talks, in your articles, is that what you say, what you do, and how you do it, it all comes back to how your destiny comes across, as what you just mentioned.
Beautifully said. As a matter of fact, that probably was something that just came into my awareness recently because I've been spending all my time thinking about consciousness.
Hmm.
In the spiritual realm, you're going to think, hey, you got to raise your consciousness. And then I ran into a series of books by Dr. David Hawkins, who said very clearly that you come in with a level of consciousness that you may be able to adjust downward easy. You can go all the way down to zero. But he has this map of about, a 0 to 1,000. 1,000 being the Christ, the Muhammads, and the
Of
avatars, that
course.
kind of stuff. And then, of course, we're all playing at different levels of consciousness. And I was like, well, I need to raise my consciousness. And he was very clear that I could only raise my consciousness by about 5 points while I'm here, because my soul came into this physical plane with a choice of, hey, if I'm at this level of consciousness, I'm going to see the world at this level. But if I'm at this level or this level, I consciously made that choice before coming in here. So I've got to deal with the cards I'm working with. And that's when it hit me. Oh my gosh, it wasn't about this idea about getting conscious increasing. It was about congruency increasing. So here's how it works. My understanding is, as my identity, when I say who I am and I do things that are in alignment with that, then all of a sudden that creates consistency. Consistency of those two things over time creates this congruence.
Mm-hmm.
Congruence over time creates coherence. And coherence is the moment, the focal point of your attractor factor that says, as a frequency, I'm now attracting my destiny to me based upon who I say I am. And you talk about goosebumps, Thomas. Come on, this is there's a formula in this physical plane. There's structure to this thing. I can understand that. My third grade brain can understand that. I can teach that. I can remind people of this, because that's the shift that's going to be necessary in the next 100 years.
Wow. And in fact, when I'm talking in my podcast to many other people, they have mentioned the same thread. What you have mentioned is that there is a visible change which is taking place. The vibration are very much present. And you mentioned at some earlier is that 30 years before there was no word called as coach. But now, why is this particular world of coaching or podcasting brimming around? Because the world needs it. There was a point wherein you mentioned is that your own level, when we consider it as 5%, we know it is going to be there. But when we are creating, and you have been mentioning time and again about a self, as Tony Robbins calls awaken the giant within. That was one of my first books that I had read. And from looking at your articles, you talk about the master within.
Mm.
So, if it is not a trade secret, what are the elements that people could seek for the master? Of course, if they have to learn to the for the codes or understand on what needs to be done, they would have to pivot towards your learnings a little more or buy your book. Please do. That's going to be very exciting for you. But when you talk about awakening the master within, what would you suggest? I'm not asking for any advice, because advice comes and goes.
Mm. Yep. It's wow, what a wonderful question. And I don't believe I've ever been asked it in that way, Thomas. So thank you. The master has always been awakened in you, Thomas. It never sleeps. There's no awakening necessary. What we're really talking about here is getting the hell out of your own way so you can listen to it again.
Mhm.
The master is in each one of us. It's called our soul. And that soul is connected to source. The challenge is, brother, we've been listening to our ego as our source for so long. It's time to make the transition. And now hear me very carefully, because I went on this path where I was like all in my soul, and I was wearing white linens, and I was walking around, talking about this, and I was meditating. Listen, you do that long enough, people come and start taking your furniture.
For a moment, I had to listen. Okay.
So my understanding about this is that there's an integration possible, because when we go to the next dimension, when we transition from this space to the next dimension, I get to play out my soul all day long. In this environment, Thomas, I can now integrate my soul and my ego together into a new integration. We call it the fifth element. mind, body, soul, and ego into this physical plane. But when we just listen to our ego, well, we've created what we see from that. So now we just have to start finding this balance or centeredness around integrating our soul and our ego together, because that's what this place is about. It's not just going one to your soul or your body or your mind or your ego. It's about integration of all four of those elements into a fifth element. And here's how it works. You're probably going through your life where your ego, your body, your mind, or your soul is using you. I'm talking about you using them, creating from that place that says, when I go into a place and goes, hey, I'm going to use my ego in this situation, why would that be helpful? Because feeling really good about yourself is really powerful. Being a sexy beast is really powerful. Feeling happy that you just accomplished something really good, that's all ego stuff. And your soul is going to to do it differently. It's going to have a different meaning. Your body's going to have a different meaning. Bringing all those together is the opportunity of a lifetime. And that's what gets me out of bed every single day. Just boom, jumping out of bed going, I get a chance to take all four of those elements into a fifth element and go and experience that. There is no greater joy that I found so far than that experience.
Either you're an excellent salesman or that is so obvious in you. Is that the joy? Sorry.
That's beautiful.
So this is the beauty of the podcast, is that because I'm doing the podcast, I have got the liberty
Yes.
of saying some particular things, but there's so much of power in what you just mentioned, David, and you know that there is a power in that.
Yes.
And as you're talking about it, yes, we do talk about the soul. We talk about be still and the voice within speaks.
Mm.
And we say a lot of these particular things, but listening about it is good. But it goes back to your experience with Tony Robbins, and wherein people heard it, they transformed their life, but then they fell off, not making it a part of their day-to-day existence. And that's where I believe the magic happens, is that once they become a part of it. So with this, what you're having, David, over here, I would like to take some time. Um, what are your current projects, or what are you working on that you would love to tell the listeners about?
So the first book, of course, is part of this sword system kind of thing. And on each one of the swords is an engravement, a principle about how to do something really unique, which is reprogram your subconscious mind. Now, most of us aren't aware of this, but 95% of everything that we're manifesting in this physical realm comes from the subconscious part of your brain. You beautifully know that. Now,
Yes.
okay, but we're having a conscious conversation here, Thomas. I was like, well, then if 95% is taken care of by my subconscious, then 5% is manifesting from my conscious part of my brain. I'm not liking what I'm seeing out here. How do I change? Well, if you don't change that subconscious part of your brain, then you're not going to change your reality and experience of this event. Let's just say that's true for a minute. Let's
Okay.
just theoretically. The swords of illumination are the elements that you want to consider. Then there are 12 swords, 12, interesting, that you then want to take as elements: one's identity, your mission and purpose. And you've heard these terms before, just not collectively, into understanding how these are the elements of your subconscious mind, your brain. So now you can consciously create who you wish to experience yourself at. And as we go through our coaching system, we actually have something called the I Am Studio. And the I Am Studio allows you to sit in studio with your own voice, with your own words that you've downloaded from source, right? Not from ego, from your soul. And we take you through a journey with that about how to actually do that. You download information, you write this script down, and then you sit in studio with me and you actually speak this into this microphone. And then we use theta-based frequency music, which is the learning frequency of your subconscious brain, that says, okay, I've integrated my own voice, my own verbiage, no one else's verbiage. I've downloaded it from my soul
Hmm.
onto paper. I then speak it into the studio, and then I reprogram that into my subconscious part of my brain by listening to it twice a day. I'm remembering who I am. And that's when the universe takes off for you. Because once I have that subconscious part of my brain and I'm reprogramming this, then my 95% of what I'm manifesting is actually being designed by me consciously.
Wonderful. This is what's the word? Serendipity, wherein something is going on. Because the reason I'm saying this one, among the in the Gallup strength for me, it is something called as connectedness. And connectedness is there are no coincidences in this universe.
Yes.
Just the other day, I was listening to Joe Dispenza,
Oh, yes.
and I believe was it being supernatural or the habit of unmasking your own self, one of those particular, wherein he mentioned is that your subconscious mind, wherein they put in that test for students learning piano who has never done piano but subconsciously just tuning, and they turn out to a point wherein they start playing the piano. So that reflects so very much onto what you are having. So is there any course or number one, is there a course or is there a new book or how many volumes of the swords have come up so far? Sure, should I ask just the listeners to go to your website or how exactly would this work around?
So book one is already available for you. We've already sent it out. We have it in audio and we have it in book form, so paperback or hard copy. So that's in book two is we're writing it right now. And when I say we're writing it, it's downloading that information, right? It's
Okay.
just pulling it through. So where I got this idea from was I grew up in the 70s and 80s, of course, and there was a gentleman who was the king of everything at the time. His name was John Denver.
Okay.
And John Denver was this had this magical voice. He sang country roads, and
Country
you'd be
roads, of course. For a moment, I
folks.
wanted to say
Yeah.
John Denver, the singer. I said, okay, let me just pause. Please, who does not know John Denver? Please.
So he was in movies though, right? He was in theater. He was on Broadway. He was, a folk singer on stage. I mean, he was everywhere during the 70s. He was huge, and I'll never forget it. Oh gosh, Thomas, how old was I? I was 14, 15. I was watching the Dick Cavett show. John Denver was on it. And Dick Cavett said, "How did you write Country Roads? And Sunshine on my shoulder, right? How did you write these songs?" And he just briefly paused for a minute. When you have that moment of profoundness that comes through it, and
Mhm.
you just get that goosebump feeling, and that's exactly what happened as he said this. It just came to me as an idea, and I was like, "What is that? What is this idea phase?" And so when I share with you that things can come through you, most of the creativity that you're designing in your lifetime is coming through you. And what you do with it, whether you do anything with it or not, is your own, self-talking yourself out of those great ideas. Right? But John was so trusting of the universe to be able to send him that information that he wrote that song down, just like Mozart did. Mozart was famous for writing full compositions, right? Without a single erasing of it. He was dictating the information. A master who I've worked for the last 27 years, Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversation with God,
Conversation with God.
he did the same thing. He got on his yellow pad and he started having an argument with God and saying, and then he heard this voice. It said, "Well, do you really want to know, or are you just asking?" And he was like, "Yeah, I really want to know." And that book two, book five, book nine, it came through him, Thomas. We have this ability. How do we practice to be able to get that ability back? That's what we do as coaches here. We help you remind yourself of what it is so that you can download that information for your own purposes, not to affect anybody else. Because some of the ways you can live your life is, doing things for others, which we've all probably done enough of that, doing things for yourself, which can lead into that selfishness if you do it enough. But where I want to get to my level of mastery is I'm doing things in this lifetime simply because they represent who I am. And there's a peace to that, Thomas, that in the midst of all this chaos, the mind chatter isn't there for me anymore. The talk is like, hey, what about this and what about this and what if and scary and Trump this, administration, Biden that. I don't have that worry anymore. I'm no longer a worrier. I'm a warrior.
Wonderful. That just changed the entire trajectory of what you just said. Just being mindful of the time, David. Is there any lasting thoughts that you would like the listeners to take away with in this conversation?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to be announcing in April that we're going to start group coaching around the first book. So that's exciting, and individual coaching around that. So look for that in the future. And come to our website, that kind of stuff at samuraisuccess.com. That's great. But if I was going to really reflect on this in this conversation we had today, please just remember this. There is a master inside of you. And when you can really start listening to that, not the ego master, the soul master that really is connected to source. All the answers you've ever asked, all the questions you've ever asked are there. You don't have to come to me or to Thomas or anybody else. Those answers are within you. But it does take some training to be able to start trusting that source again, because we've been so busy listening to our ego and everybody else's ego and the talking heads that everybody wants to tell you. Let me tell you what you need to do with your life. Okay? That's created a certain experience on this physical plane. There's a new opportunity, Thomas, that we can stop listening to other people and start listening to our internal master. And that's the journey we take people through.
Knock your internal universe and the outer universe opens up for you.
Well said, sir.
So, guys, what we just heard in this powerful episode was reigniting a sense of destiny,
Mm.
using the sword of illumination. How David mentioned about closing the gap between what you say, who you are, and how you show up. He also mentioned about the power to of self-created identity, how your identity shapes your destiny, what you say, what you think, and how you do it. He did mention about hearing your own words, which is downloaded from above. With this, he also went into the element of the inner master, the powerful master within all of us who holds the answers to your deepest of questions. Embracing your destiny. It's not just for the handful, but it's for every one of us. Thank you for an amazing, inspirational conversation with you on unlocking your true potential. And here, what I heard was living a life of purpose and fulfillment. Thank you so very much, David.
Thank you, Thomas.